In the frozen grey dawn of April 1242, 300 tons of iron and horse thunder across the slippery surface of Lake Peipus. The battle on the ice 1242 begins with the deafening crash of a Teutonic wedge striking the Russian center. A Hanseatic cog falling dry on the mudflats nearby marks the arrival of a logistical powerhouse that traditional war cannot touch. This clash is not just about faith, it is about a terrifying secret regarding transactional baptism that will transform a holy mission into a commercial empire. The knights do not know the ice. How does a region of impenetrable marshes and dark ancient forests remain a pagan wedge in the heart of a Christian continent? Tribal elders still offer honey to the spirits of the woods where the light filters through a dense canopy of ancient oaks. This geography dictates a maritime conquest focused on the deep river systems like the Daugava. Merchants from the west see not lost souls, but repositories of Siberian furs and beeswax. This commercial interest turns a spiritual boundary into a profitable frontier of exploitation. The forest is watching. Could a single missionary's offer to build stone walls have prevented the centuries of carnage that follow? The limestone fortifications at Uxküll rise starkly against the timber huts of the Livonian natives as a monument to soft power. Friar Meinhard believes the gift of masonry will secure the gift of salvation. He provides the tribes with security against raids in exchange for their acceptance of the cross. The completion of these forts creates a permanent shift in the landscape that the natives are quick to exploit for their own survival. Salvation is a currency. Was the brutal death of the first martyr the necessary fuel to ignite a full-scale European crusade? Bishop Berthold rides into a skirmish near the future site of Riga and finds his horse struggling against the soft, boggy ground. The sound of his mount threshing in the mire is followed by the sharp crack of wooden spears. His body is hacked to pieces by those he intended to save. This violent transition from missionary work to holy war gives the Church a narrative that Rome cannot ignore. The crusade is officially sanctioned. Bishop Albert of Buxtehude does not wait for the Baltic. He builds a city. A fleet of 23 ships lands at the mouth of the Daugava in 1200, carrying 1,500 armed pilgrims. The spire of the new Riga Cathedral rises above Hanseatic warehouses, signaling the union of capital and the cross. Albert grants the city the Hamburg law to ensure merchants are free from arbitrary taxes. He builds a system where the sword is a permanent requirement for business. The city is a machine for conquest. How does the technological breakthrough of the Hanseatic cog grant the Crusaders a logistical advantage that the tribes cannot match? This bulbous, high-sided oak vessel features prominent castles at the bow and stern, where archers rain fire down on any border. Its unique flat bottom allows it to navigate the silted river mouths that traditionally protect the pagan interior. The sound of heavy cordage snapping under tension is the music of an integrated market being forged. These superships transform the transportation of salt and grain into a weapon of war. Was the true war for the Baltic hidden beneath the official prohibitions of the Roman Catholic Church? A secret warehouse in Riga smells of cured squirrel furs as iron bars are exchanged for luxury goods under the cover of night. The Pope bans the trade of war materials like iron and salt to infidels, yet these are the most profitable commodities. Merchants and knights alike draft treaties defining protected market zones where a spear's cast ensures safety. This culture of pragmatic evasion keeps the frontier alive. Business is the engine of the crusade. Did the social desperation of the ministeriale class contribute to the extreme brutality of the Livonian Brothers of the Sword? These landless serf knights seek social advancement through service and build district castles to dominate the primeval forest. The sharp, slappy wooden smack of a composite crossbow releasing its tension is the primary sound of their authority. They operate more like a corporate militia than a holy order, focused on establishing their own feudal domains. Their reliance on static stone defenses makes them efficient but dangerously isolated from the population. The sword is their law. Could the Sword Brothers have predicted that their reliance on heavy cavalry would lead to a tactical disaster in the Samogitian heathlands? A column of riders, laden with plundered goods, struggles through the wet heathlands of Lithuania in the autumn of 1236. Master Volkwin initially avoids the campaign, knowing his knights lack the mobility required for this terrain. A determined group of pagan warriors waits at a river crossing, watching the ironclad column slow to a crawl. This environmental bottleneck forces the Crusaders into a night encampment they cannot defend. The swamp is the enemy. The first javelin strike at the Battle of Saule marks the point of no return. This is the moment the situation becomes irreversible as the boggy terrain turns heavy armor into a death trap. Lithuanians use heavy wooden cudgels called boomen to break the legs of the horses and drag knights into the mud. The auditory landscape is a nightmare of clanking plate armor sinking into the mire. This disaster mirrors the promise of Peipus. The environment is a participant that favors the fluid over the rigid. The Sword Brothers are essentially destroyed. How does the diplomatic genius of Hermann von Salza allow the Teutonic Order to absorb the wreckage of the Sword Brothers? The massive brick headquarters at Marienburg serves as a central command hub that professionalizes the transition from frontier to state. Von Salza secures the Golden Bull of Rimini, granting his knights total sovereignty over any lands they conquer. They import German peasant volunteers to build permanent farms and establish a reliable tax base. This systematic approach replaces disorganized brutality with the cold efficiency of a theocratic corporation. The mission becomes a government. Was the push toward the wealthy Republic of Novgorod driven by religious zeal or the desire to control the fur trade? Crusader banners fly over the Orthodox monasteries of Pskov after the city falls through internal betrayal and a calculated siege. Alexander Nevsky, a strategist in his early 20s, is recalled from exile to lead a desperate defense. He understands that the Teutonic advance is a systematic attempt to dismantle the cultural identity of the East. This ideological collision ensures that the coming battle will determine the permanent boundary of Europe. The East prepares. Could the tactical differences between the Boar's Snout formation and the Novgorodian militia explain the outcome on Lake Peipus? A tightly packed wedge of heavy cavalry accelerates across the frozen lake, aiming to punch through the Russian center. Alexander Nevsky deliberately weakens his middle and positions elite druzhina and horse archers on his wings. The Russian infantry stands against the precipitous eastern shore, their shields overlapping, to create a psychological target. The air is thick with the whistling sound of arrows from deadly composite bows. The knights take the bait. Did the weight of 4,000 men and horses on thawing spring ice create a tactical prison? The slippery ice is soon covered in blood and gore as the knights lose the traction required for their primary advantage: momentum. The auditory landscape shifts from the thunder of the charge to the steady clanging of steel against iron helmets. While the mass drowning is a cinematic embellishment, the tactical reality involves knights being outnumbered 60-1 in a chaotic melee. This environmental pressure exacerbates the physical exhaustion of men fighting in heavy mail. The formations break. The Treaty of 1242 does not just end a battle, it executes economics. The Teutonic Order is forced to renounce all claims to Russian lands and return every prisoner taken during the campaign. 50 German knights are paraded through the streets of Pskov as a symbolic end to the Crusader expansion. This resolution stops the eastward momentum of the Catholic mission and establishes the Narva River as a permanent frontier. The Order's defeat triggers immediate internal revolts among the conquered Estonians and Prussians. The westward momentum is permanently halted. Was the internal rebellion against the papal legate Baldwin of Alna proof that the Crusaders had outgrown the Church? The merchants of Riga and the Sword Brothers stand together against a legate who attempts to create a papal state under direct Roman control. In August 1233, a sanguinary clash results in the defeat of the Pope's own representative by his intended warriors. This defiance shows that the men on the ground prioritize the stability of their markets over spiritual authority. The birth of a localized Baltic identity begins with this rejection of mandates. Profit overrides prayer. How did the Germanization of the frontier relegate the indigenous populations to the bottom of a new feudal hierarchy? A Baltic German manor house stands surrounded by fields of indigenous peasants whose labor fuels the grain exports of the north. This social structure suppresses local culture and integrates the pagan wedge into the productive machine of the European economy. Lithuania remains the only state to maintain independence, forming its own centralized power to resist the order. The forced conversion creates a deep cultural resentment that defines regional politics for centuries. The land is transformed. Did the legendary breaking of the ice at Lake Peipus become a national myth because the landscape acted as a participant? The visual of thin ice collapsing under the weight of heavy armor is an iconic image from the 1938 film Alexander Nevsky. This mythologization of the cold as a Russian ally recurs through history, from the battle on the ice 1242 to the defeat of Napoleon. The clanging of swords and the slippery ice covered in blood provide a visceral connection to the land. This narrative tool obscures the strategic reality. The legend survives. Was the ultimate winner of the Northern Crusades the Hanseatic merchant who achieved a transnational monopoly on Baltic trade? The secret of transactional baptism reveals that the tribes were never truly converted. They merely bought security until trade could replace the sword. By the 15th century, the Hanseatic League numbers over 200 cities and holds a monopoly that forces even kings to grant special privileges. A Hanseatic Day in Lubeck sees representatives deciding the economic fate of kingdoms from London to Novgorod. The cog provided the integration. The traders won. The battle on the ice 1242 is forgotten by chroniclers, but the permanent border it established is not. This engagement defines the cultural limit of the Latin West and the beginning of the Orthodox East. Medieval Hanseatic architecture in modern Riga and Tallinn stands as a monument to the integration of the Baltic into the global economy. Alexander Nevsky dies in 1263 after years of balancing Mongol tribute with the defense of the Orthodox faith. The Teutonic Order pivots to the Great Prussian Revolt, a brutal insurgency that consumes their strength for 7 years. Which historical clash should we explore next? If this deep dive into the hidden wars of the Baltic helped you understand the intersection of trade and the cross, scan the QR code on screen to subscribe and continue the series with History Weaver.